Welcome back to All Things Financial. I'm Trey Peterson with Yelisey, Kuts, my business partner. We are back after a little bit of a break, and we are excited to help you win with your money, help you multiply your money, and give you a fresh perspective on how to win in your finances so you can win in your life. We're going to be bringing different money tips, money tricks, and we're going to be sharing our background on why we started the business, how we run our business, so that we can help you win in your life and in your finances. Please join us for season number 2, starting now. Welcome to All Things Financial, Trey Peterson and
Yelisey Kuts.
And we're really excited to start season 2 of our podcast, the All Things Financial podcast, where we help you win with your money so that you can win in your life. And today we've got episode number 1, really just telling a little bit of our background, our story, how we started the business, and things that you should be thinking about when it comes to your money.
Before we get started, though, let's do the quote of the day. Oh, wait, we're not doing that anymore because this is season 2. We've made some changes.
I like the quote of the day.
Yeah, well, maybe we could bring it back. But for now, we're not doing quote of the day. But we're just going to get to know our audience a little bit better. We're going to maybe reintroduce some of the topics. I think in the last podcast, we probably spent a lot of time talking about, I would say maybe some of the same topics or similar topics. And one of the things that we want to do is kind of make this a little bit broader. We want to introduce some fresh insights, some new topics, and maybe some things that actually relate to a younger audience too, who we work with on a daily basis are those that are in and nearing retirement. And those topics are very important for anyone, no matter what stage of life you're in. But also there's some things that we want to discuss that maybe doesn't relate exactly to that specific segment of the population.
Well, we have different preferences for how we spend our money and invest our money. One of the things that we both have learned is that when you win in your finances, everything else in life is easier. And I don't know about for you, but my wife and I, our marriage is better. My headspace is better. Everything about life is better just when you manage and steward your money well. So I think one of the things that I know I'm really passionate about is helping people win in their money, because one of the things I've just found is that when your money is in order, everything else in life is easier. So July 1st, 2025, we'll have started our business. It'll have been our 8-year business anniversary. It's really amazing how good it's been, how hard it's been, and all the things that we've learned.
It's nice to be able to be in a position where you have some money, and that's why you're able to give the advice that you do. In all honesty, we're kind of in the money business. And one thing that you find is, money can be, it's not always a positive conversation for a lot of people. And that's why we're really passionate about what we do. I mean, you think about what true wealth means. And one thing that I think I've come to find is true wealth for me is, not having any anxiety, right? Not having to worry about those things. And you look at how disruptive it can be when you don't have the means to pay for certain things like your mortgage, or you're worried about the effect of inflation and what that does to many of the families that we come across. So being able to help them and give them guidance and navigating those things to help them be in a better position, that's something that we're truly passionate about.
Yeah. I was an athlete, so football, wrestling, rugby, and I would say at a young age, worked really hard, got really used to striving at something, having goals. But one of the things that I learned is that when I came out of college, I thought I was going to land my dream job, make a ton of money, and get rich. And what I found out is when you come from college, or when you come out of college, you get your first job, you work really hard, really just to be broke, to pay your school loans if you're paying those. If you have those, I should say, to pay for your apartment or your housing.
Yeah.
And there's really a lot of surprises that come with that. We want to help you win with your money. And I think one of the biggest life lessons for me is that I always thought when I make more money, life will be better. And while there is some truth to that, because finances can bring peace, wherever you start, one of the things that I probably would have done differently is I would have better stewarded the season that I was in, so that instead of being anxious, I think for what was next, I could better enjoy while I was striving for something. And, we don't have the statistics pulled out right now for this, but most people live paycheck to paycheck, and they say that the average marriage only lasts 7 years, and the number one reason for that is because of fighting over finances.
Yeah. how would you define true wealth? I mean, obviously we can get into the numbers and you hear things like, the recommended savings percentage that you should have for retirement, how much you should have based on every age category. And you hear those numbers and sometimes people fall short or they look at those numbers in a very rigid way, but really all of us have different preferences and different needs. But if you could just say like, how would you define true wealth? And if you could just include things that are outside of just the financial numbers themselves.
Another word that I would use for wealth is freedom, right? So for me, what that looks like is when I was young, I was a little bit unique. My parents are in ministry, and we got a gentleman that was in our church, and he was in what's called the Amway business, which is a network marketing model. And Amway is really incredible because one of the things they've done is they've taught a lot of kids like me or adults that come from what I would call blue collar families how to have a dream for your life, how to set goals, how to fall in love with personal development. One of the things our business coach, Keith Kraft, always says is when you get better, everything around you gets better. And I would say Amway was really the first group that taught me that. And so for me, what I learned at 12 years old is that wealth was when you control your time, your income, and you get to do something that you love every single day. And so even when I was young, I didn't know what I wanted to do. In fact, my junior year of college, I'll never forget, I had a successful business leader ask me, he said, Trey, once you're out of school, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I know I want to control my time, my income, and I want to do something that I love the process of every day. He actually looked at me, and he was somebody that at that time, at 20 years old, I knew that he was making $350,000 a year, which when you're in college, you might as well have said 10 million a year. He said, welcome to commercial insurance. And so he opened the door for me to get into an industry that I think it fell in line with my strengths, which is connecting with people, sales, solving problems, controlling your income by controlling how much you want to work. But what I found out quickly is that I chased what he had, the fruit in his life, but it took me 3.5 years to find out that while I wanted what he had, I didn't enjoy what he enjoyed. And so I would say true wealth is not just having finances, it's not just having time. But one of the questions, and you've heard me say this and you'll hear it a lot, is it took me 3.5 years to figure out that really that true wealth is if everything paid the same, how would you spend your time? And I think that's why, I look at my skill set, which is very different than yours. But if you look at somebody that is relationship focused, they love solving problems, they like the sales piece, there's really only a handful of options. You've got what I would call as like financial planning, which is what we're in. You've got being a real estate agent, which offers a lot of the same benefits, but also takes the same skill set. You've got the mortgage industry, you've got banking, and then you've got what I would say is like direct marketing because you're a people person. So when I looked at all of those things, I started with commercial insurance because I knew it offered a lot of what I thought was true wealth, which is controlling your time, controlling your income. Obviously, there's going to be 5 or 7 or 10 years that you're spending 65, 70 hours a week to create that. But there's a possibility where there's a lot of things that you don't have those options, right? So for me, to summarize, true wealth would be where you have a career that you love, you work with a group of people or a culture that encourages you, motivates you, makes you better. They have similar core values, and that you're making the kind of money that your family has options to live how you want to live. Whether that's conservative because that's who you are, or whether you're somebody that you really like nice things, you value those, but you still have investments and savings. So to me, true wealth is that you set a goal, that you live that goal, and that you don't spend your time being concerned about finances.
I think that very last part is what kind of hits home for me. Not being concerned about finances. And I don't know if that's like, I grew up in a family where, we didn't have what you just described. For us, there was actually huge periods of time where we were very concerned about the finances, and my parents had to scramble to figure out, hey, how are we going to make this work? So I think for me that part really just kind of strikes home for me. We've been in the interview process over the last couple of months. We've seen a lot of people, and I would say that, there's a lot of things that motivate people to get into the financial services industry. What do you think of like when you hear people say you should follow your passion, right? If that's the advice that someone is giving, like what are some of the holes in that kind of thinking? Like what is the middle ground between finding something that, maybe caters to your talents or is within your skill set versus pursuing something that's maybe I would define as more of a glamorous or a sexy career versus just being really good at something that potentially could pay you a lot more money and then you could pursue your passions outside of that career.
Yeah.
Where's that middle ground?
Remember at Oral Roberts University, so Yelisey and I went there together, we had a professor, Lewandowski, and he said something during one of the business classes that really stuck with me. And he said, if you want to create real wealth, ignore the sexy businesses and buy into a boring business.
Right.
Because the boring businesses are the ones that are going to be around a long time. They're going to be stable. And one of the things that you and I have learned is most of the families that we serve are the individuals. Most of them are not high income earning individuals. They're people that had a good job. They were consistent. They were disciplined and they put away money over time. Mm-hmm. So when I think about that, the first thing I think about is, like if I chased my passions, I would probably breed German Shepherds for a living. And I don't know that there's a way to make the kind of money that I need to make to support my family and be successful. So I think that, well, that sounds good. I think the other thing I found is sometimes the things that we're most passionate about are best kept as a hobby. Every career that you and I look for, there are going to be pieces that we're passionate about, and there's going to be pieces that are just part of the career or that job, right? So the example would be, is when I was in commercial insurance, what I liked is as a commercial insurance broker, my job was to build relationships with C-level suite executives, CEOs, CFOs, and controllers. And I would work with them to find out how we could help them with risk management, 401k planning, and their insurances. And what I found is while I loved sitting in meetings and persuading and winning over business owners to a better idea or a better process, 80% of my time was spent doing paperwork, applications, speaking with insurance companies. And so what I found is one of the keys is that every career that you have is going to have a percentage of things that you and I don't like doing, right? Yeah. Would you agree with that?
All of it.
All of it. There isn't.
I mean, all of what I do.
100%.
100% of what I do out of obligation.
Man, that's a great partnership. And 0% what I do. No, so what I would say though is most successful business owners that I speak with, one of the questions I like to ask, and I think this is important for everybody, is when you think about your work or your career, what percentage of your day are you doing things that you really enjoy? And I don't know that there's like a number that you have to hit, but if you were to ask me like, what's a winning number? I think if 50% of your day is things that you love and 50% of your day is things that you have to do, I think that's a great start. One of the things that I've worked really hard to do, and one of the reasons that we have a partnership is we have different strengths. And we also have brought on other team members so that as we've grown, we've handed off things that I don't enjoy, things that you don't enjoy. So one of the things that I look at is success is where you can get into a role and you have a team of people so that you can increase your time in your best and highest use. So anybody that listens to John Maxwell, by the way, if you don't know who John Maxwell is, Google him. He's the #1 guru on leadership today. Also somebody that lives by core values. But what John Maxwell talks about is the law of the lid. What's the law of the lid? The law of the lid is if you are on a scale of 1 to 10, like paperwork, if you are a 3 at paperwork, which, I would be probably a -3. But if you're a 3, you shouldn't spend your time focusing on getting great at paperwork. You should focus on that thing that you're a 6 so that you can get it to an 8 or a 9.
Yeah.
So for me, what is that? For me, that's building relationships with people, solving problems, and what we would call is like a sales type role. So instead of spending my time going to conferences, getting better at paperwork and administrative tasks, that 3 at best is going to be a 5. One of the things that we know is that if you're a 5 at things, they don't pay very well. What pays well is when you're a 7, 8, 9, or 10. So I spend most of my time and I invest in myself getting around other great thought leaders, people that focus on speaking, reading, writing, sales. And I learn from them so that if I'm a 6 in sales, I can get up to an 8. And then hopefully over the next 10 years, an 8.5 or a 9.
One of the biggest things, especially if you're younger, and we've interviewed so many younger guys recently, one of the pieces of advice that I've heard you say, and I agree with wholeheartedly, is one of the biggest things you should be looking for is discovering what your talents are. If you can find out what that talent is, and then you can decide the direction that you're going in. But finding out what that is probably more important than finding or landing the dream job.
I think one of the things I hear a lot of young people say, 20-somethings and 30-somethings, is that they're in their job and they haven't found that thing. Well, how do you find the thing that you love and you're good at? It's by knocking on doors and trying things. So to me, success in a perfect world is that you come out of college and you find your thing. Well, that didn't happen to me. I got into commercial insurance, and looking back, I wish I would have realized sooner that there was 80% of the tasks that I didn't enjoy. But there's also a balance, because part of getting to where you enjoy 50, 60, 70, 80% is you can do that as you have more success if you're thoughtful.
Yeah.
So I would just say that if you're young and you don't know what you're supposed to do, the way you find out is by trying and trying again. One of the things that my dad, Dr. Tim Peterson, would always say is that successful people are builders, and people that don't have success are always moving and making changes. They're not committed to anything. And so looking back, my first 7 years out of college when we graduated, I had 6 different job transitions, and all of them were in sales types roles and in different companies. But I actually needed to go through those things to really discover who I am, what I want. And I think as or more important as figuring out what you want is figuring out what you don't want. And so one of the things I knew is I wasn't going to be an engineer. I wasn't going to be an accountant. So at least I had an idea of the field, but then I had to go find out the industry, which took some time, 3.5 years. And then I would say even beyond the industry, I had to find the culture that I best fit into. I think if you have a sales type personality, and maybe even beyond that, one of the things that one of your giftings is you're a wooer. What does that mean? You love to woo people onto your side, right? You're winning people over. So one of the things I love is winning people over. But what I found is you can't win everybody over, because not everybody is supposed to be in alignment of yours. So one of my favorite quotes is there are 4 types of people. There are people that you meet that they're going to like you right away. They're going to trust you, and they're going to want to work with you or have a friendship with you. So that's 25% of people. There's 25% of people that you meet that they have no experience. They don't know anybody that knows you. So based on your interactions over several weeks or several months will determine if those people are for you. 25% of people, and we all know people like this, they're neutral, meaning that they're never going to support you. They're not going to be against you. They are just sitting there. You are probably thinking of somebody like that right now. Those people are not maybe for or against anything. They're just neutral. But then here's the last part, and maybe the most important. 25 and the last 25% of people that you meet, no matter what I do, they're not going to like me. They're not going to be on my side. And I spent a lot of time trying to win those people over. And I found through experience that instead of trying to win those people over, I've just decided they're not my tribe. And so I'm going to go work with people that are for me. They want to see me win. They like me. And one of the things I've found is that in order for you and I to win, we need to have people around us that want to see us win.
Yeah. And would you say that 25%, that's across the board? I find that my number is closer to 35.
80%.
80%
will
of the
never
people
like me.
One last thing I want to say, what we just talked about, and I actually heard this, it was kind of a good analogy. And the question that was posed was, if you could choose like the industry that you want to be in, let's say you wanted to be an actor. Right. There's a very small chance you're going to be one of the top 10 actors.
Yeah.
But like you'll probably end up being, let's say you're an amazing actor, you might end up being one of the top 100 actors. Would you rather be a top 100 actor?
Yeah.
Or would you rather be a top 100, I don't know, fill in the blank, whatever boring industry you can figure out?
Yeah.
And there's a chance that if you're, let's say, the top 100th actor, you might be broke. Like there's a good chance in some of those like glamorous industries, it's kind of like, sink or swim, and there's so many ebbs and flows. Whereas if you're like the top 100 engineer or the top 100 landscaper, you're probably wealthier than that actor and many of the actors too. So it's like there's probably some middle ground, and I tend to lean in one direction. Maybe you lean a little bit harder than the other versus, pursuing your passion, doing those things. But I think we wanted to say all that to say is we kind of found the perfect blend for what we want to do.
Yeah.
Right. We're so passionate about what we do. We have a matching skill set that helps us help folks get closer to retire, that are getting closer to retirement, helping them put together financial plans, helping to preserve what they have, helping to extend the longevity of their dollars, especially during periods of high volatility, this inflationary cycle that we're going through. And that's what this podcast is going to be about. We want to continue helping those people. We want to give them good information to help achieve exactly what I just laid out.
Yeah.
So that's why we're here. That's what we're doing. And like I said, we're extending it to the younger generation, the younger audience too.
Yeah.
So
I think what I love about what we do is that money is one of those things that no matter what your industry is or what your interests are, money is involved in your life.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a house, my parents are pastors. My mom does marriage and family
So they were
counseling.
always wealthy.
Yeah, right. No, I remember when we were poor, and I'm thankful that I got to experience that,
Didn't you say there were years your dad didn't even make $100,000?
Okay, Chelsea Sunning. No. So, but what I would say is that one of the things I love about what we do is that money is something that everybody can talk about money because it's involved in everything. But what it's done is it's given us a way to help people so that really by helping them with Social Security, investments, tax planning, having what I would call as a financial plan, is they get to actually live out their life with financial peace. And so one of the things I love about what we do is we make people's lives better by stepping in a place where most people are not experts in money. And we're able to allow them to live their life really not thinking about money because of what we've put together. And I think it's really important. I think it's really powerful. And so when I think about my everyday, I would say over 80% of my daily tasks are things that I enjoy. Now, sometimes they're still hard, like the days that I have like 6 or 7 or 8 back-to-back meetings, like I know that I love those meetings, but you have to prepare for those meetings. You're heavily listening. I go home tired. My wife will say, tell me about your day. And I'll say it was good.
Yeah, no, same thing.
And I'm talked out. But I think if you love your work, and I think if you're working with great people that are for you, I think that you're winning. So just to go back, what is wealth? To me, wealth is waking up every day excited. I would say that I'm one of those people that probably 6 out of 7 days I jump out of bed because I'm excited for the day. True wealth is where you've built your business or your career to where you're stable. At first, one of the things nobody talks about is we don't go from broke to rich. We go from broke to stable. And then beyond that, if you invest well, save well, etc. But once you're stable, now all of a sudden it's all about becoming a builder. And I would say no matter who you are, whether you're a wealth manager or you're a school teacher, your mindset should be, I'm going to be a builder and I'm going to build something. So I would just end with this. I think a lot of times we think of wealth as financial, and I think it's so much more than that. And you and I both know people that are not motivated by money, and that's not a bad thing. If you think about, I've got a friend and he's one of the most disciplined, organized, and I would say successful people I know, and he's a school teacher. What makes him so successful? He was school teacher of the year. He got his master's degree. He's not just a teacher, but he's a coach. He's coaching the sports that he loves most.
Yeah.
He's got a wife that loves her job. They have a couple great sons. They put a pool in their backyard, not because they have big incomes, but because they're good savers, good stewards. And I look at them and I'm like, man, my friend Tim is a really wealthy person because he wanted to be a school teacher. He sought out his undergrad and master's, became a school teacher. He's been a teacher of the year, and his life is excelling. To me, that's true wealth.
One of the benefits that we have, we're meeting with people that are close to 65. They're on the tail end of their career. Of course, some of them maybe are still working. The average retirement age is actually, I think, a little bit lower than that. I think it's closer to 62. So we're seeing a lot of things that people did right, a lot of things that people did wrong. And if we were to give some advice to somebody who's, let's say, in their 30s, and by the way, I just looked this up, and maybe you know the number, actually, out of curiosity, what do you think the average income is? And this is average, right? All
across the U.S.?
Across the entire U.S. Actually, a little bit higher here in Minnesota. Actually, quite a bit higher where we are. But, of course, we have listeners all over the country. So what do you think the average income is?
For an individual or household?
For an individual who's actually, let me tell you, from the age of 35 to 44.
I would guess it's $54,000 a year.
It's actually $64,000. Wow. So $64,000, considering where we are in today's inflationary period that, we've just gone through. Of course, inflation's gotten quite a bit lower. I think it's at 2.5%. It's probably difficult for someone who's 35 years old, who's just starting a family, who's maybe buying their first house, if you're able to buy your first house. I mean, we've talked to so many folks in their 30s that are just struggling to do that, right? The American dream.
For sure.
Thing that I think probably most of our parents were doing a decade earlier, right? What would you say to that person in terms of retirement savings? There's those recommendations that everyone's heard from Fidelity, how much, how many times your salary you should have at every age point, right? We've seen those. We talk about those all the time. But for someone who's 35 years old, making $64,000 a year, What advice, is there any hope? Is there any silver lining in terms of making sure you have enough for retirement? because we know what that looks like and we know what it takes because we're meeting with people in retirement.
When I was in high school, I played football, I wrestled, and I played rugby. And my football team was good. My wrestling team was number 2 in the country. And what I found is we were great at sticking to the basics. And what we did is we did the basics more, and we practiced them more often, not just every day, but weekly than everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things I hear a lot is I'll get a Facebook message and somebody from college will say, hey, Trey, I'm starting to make a bunch of money. I know Dave Ramsey is great on the way that he teaches people how to eliminate debt and grow their assets, but do you recommend another way? And I kind of laugh because really what they're saying is there a faster way that helps me eliminate the basics? And I would say that you and I would be, very aligned with Dave Ramsey up to a certain point. Once you've created some wealth, then I am more of a risk taker than you would be probably. But what I would say is that the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace course is an amazing place to start because really what he's doing is he's helping people master the basics. Yeah. So what I would say to most people is if you master the basics, which is paying off bad debt, building a savings account, starting with a home, even if you don't have a big salary, you can retire with $1 million or $1.5 million or a couple $1 million because you stuck with the basics of living below your means, not charging things on a credit card that you couldn't afford, not thinking that you should take that vacation and that you deserve it, even though your wallet says you haven't deserved it. Because if you haven't earned the money, you haven't earned the trip. So for me, it's all about sticking to the basics. And then once you've created a foundation of, again, for some of our clients, if their expenses are $7,000 a month, they're comfortable having 3 months of an emergency fund, $21,000. Others, they don't want to see their emergency fund drop below $100,000, and others $250,000. So that's preference. There's not a right and wrong in the way that you grow your wealth. Yeah. It's more about preferences. And so I've got a friend, his name is Bob. We've had this conversation. For him, he would rather grow his wealth slower as long as he sleeps well at night. And for me, I'm okay taking a risk as long as it doesn't involve like putting my home at risk, right? Right. I'm never going to bet the mothership. My dad always taught me that. Take calculated risks, but don't put yourself in a spot that your wife can't sleep at night. But for me, I would rather take more risk and get there faster. Part of it maybe is because I'm actually like addicted to some of that chaos. Yeah. But if you're like my friend Bob, or maybe more like your preference, if it's more about doing it slow in a way that it doesn't steal any of your sleep, that's the way you should create your wealth.
And as we start talking about people that are in different stages of life with different preferences, one of the things that we actually want to talk about too is for folks that are entrepreneurs, folks that are wealthy, and giving people advice not only that are on their way up, but people who have actually made it. And one of the things that I think you've noticed as well, I think I see it all the time, we've had a number of clients and a number of folks that that have been wealthy, that have lost everything, that have regained that wealth, that have lost everything again. Yep. And it's this vicious cycle. And I think it kind of lends itself to this entrepreneurship mindset, because one thing that I've learned about entrepreneurs, being around them, being an entrepreneur, these are people who tend to bet on themselves. And these are people who go into everything that they do. They think, hey, I need to go into this wholeheartedly. I got to put everything into it. And what they don't understand, it doesn't mean you have to put everything into it. You're not putting 100% of your net worth,
don't mortgage your house,
into this business. And I think that's kind of the tendency. They have this go forward, put everything into it approach, and they end up betting the whole house on it. And one of the things you can do is you can invest in multiple businesses, and what you'll find is not all of them succeed. Sometimes the ideas that you think are the best ideas end up being the ones that like could bankrupt you, right? Sometimes you put everything into this one idea and you think, hey, like if I were to pick between these 5 ideas, almost for sure, idea number 4 would be the one that's going to be successful. But you might find out the second one was actually a better option over the long run. So we want to make sure that you're not putting everything into it. We'll have some good advice for entrepreneurs, for those that are earlier in life, and also those that kind of have that steady mentality of maybe not taking as much risk, and some good practical tools and steps that you can take along the way.
Yeah, I think too is that our world, if you log into Facebook or Instagram or even LinkedIn, everybody is celebrating the entrepreneur. But I would say one of the mistakes that our culture, if you look at Gary Vaynerchuk, Alex Hormozy, really quality people in the entrepreneurial space. But I think that there's a mistake specifically that like Gary V is making, where he is preaching that everybody should be an entrepreneur. Like you watch his videos and he thinks everybody should take on that risk. And I actually think he couldn't be more wrong.
Right.
I don't think being an entrepreneur is a greater calling. I think that there's a lot of people that would be way more successful as the number 2, the number 3, the number 5 person in an organization where they're not taking the risk. They're actually just supporting the risk taker, and they sleep well at night knowing that, they don't have that risk. So one thing that we see a lot on Instagram, by the way, our Instagram account, All Things Financial, which we just started for season 2 of our podcast. Look us up. We're going to be putting great clips on there. Is I think social media says that being an entrepreneur is the goal. And I don't think it should be, because there's a lot of people that can't handle the risk. They don't want the stress. They don't want the chaos. You and I meet with a lot of entrepreneurs that at the end of their life, they end up with nothing. Yeah. Is it worth the risk if there's a chance you end up with nothing? Because I'm surprised by how many business owners that we meet with that they made great money and they had great savings, but their industry had bad luck at the timing of their life, where they ended up spending their 401ks, their retirement, their savings, trying to keep the business alive, trying to keep the sister-in-law employed, because now they've got family members and lifelong friends, and they end up with nothing. Being an entrepreneur is only for 4% of the population. Nobody talks about that. Only 4% of people have what it takes and are successful to make it as an entrepreneur.
How did you come up with those numbers?
I read it. Yeah, I read it. And I wish I had that stat for you, and I could tell you that it was from Yahoo and who wrote it, but I don't. My point to that,
I agree. It's a small percentage of people. But don't sacrifice your happiness pursuing that if it's not for you. And I think it comes back to knowing what your skills are, understanding hey, and by the way, that can change over time. Mm-hmm. We've met a number of people that have been engineers their entire career. They retire, they start consulting, and they go on to have very successful businesses. But I'm just saying that, sometimes the younger folks get really lured into that, but really they're better off just finding a job, finding a steady career, maybe in one of those boring industries, and finding a ton of success doing it that way.
When I came out of college, I was ready to start a business, but I had the wisdom to know I wasn't ready for it. So what I would say is, if you have an entrepreneurial bone in your body, instead of opening up your own business, go work for somebody that's living your dream. Let them pay you a salary to learn, and spend 3, 5, 7, or 10 years getting paid to make mistakes, getting paid to learn from somebody that's already done it, and then decide, do I want to be an entrepreneur inside of a company, which we call an entrepreneur, or do I want to launch on my own? I would say that to everybody. I spent 2 years in a corporate world learning, started my first business, which, by the way, wasn't successful because I was miserable. Went to go back to work for somebody else, loved that I didn't have payroll, didn't have risk because I was burnt out on that. And then after 2 years of working for others, launched our business, took all the risk, had a baby. I remember thinking this has to work, and it was successful. So if your goal is to be an entrepreneur, it doesn't mean you have to start that way. Let somebody pay you to learn, and at the right time, you can decide if I'm an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur.
Sometimes, just like in our planning conversations with clients, right? Clients are coming in, they're looking for retirement advice. And a lot of times we're helping them with any number of things. Like, you've helped people in retirement who didn't really have much of a call or a purpose, and they weren't really sure what to do with their time in retirement. You've set them up with organizations that have helped them do some volunteer work, things that have given them meaning outside of the job and what they've done for the last 40 years. So these conversations are going to be broad. We're going to cover a number of topics, and I'm actually really excited that this is what we covered today, considering a lot of the questions we've had recently on this very topic.
Yeah. And what's our goal as we wrap up? On the All Things Financial podcast, Yelisey and I have a goal. We want to help you win with your money so that you can win in your life. We're going to interview other great leaders. We're going to help you win with technical things, dream things, vision setting. We're going to talk about how do you develop as a person. One of the questions I get a lot is, Trey, what's the first thing I should invest into? And everybody's waiting to hear like Tesla stock,
Bitcoin, right?
Or Meta or Bitcoin. People are waiting for that. And the first thing I think you should invest into is yourself. And I've had a lot of friends, a lot of people around me that they thought it was ridiculous how much money I invest to be in the right rooms. And it's continued to work in my life, and I'm going to keep investing more in my life. I met with a guy who's in his 50s a couple weeks ago, and I said to him, he's a financial advisor in Laguna Beach. And I said to him, Sid, you've got 3 different companies. He's got a financial firm, a real estate group, and then he's got an independent marketing firm for advisors. all of those businesses are way bigger than ours individually. And I said, what's been the best investment of the 3 you've made? And he said, the best money I've spent was investing in myself. He said, I've spent millions of dollars investing in coaching with the right people, and it's made me tens of millions. So I've found that to be true, and I'm going to keep investing that way. And so one of the things I'd encourage you is invest in yourself. And one of the greatest ways to do that is to jump on this podcast, because we have mistakes that we've made. We've had some big wins, and we want to share it all. Thanks for joining us. All Things Financial. Click, like, and subscribe.
Advisory services are offered through CG Advisory Services, LLC, a registered investment advisor, and through Guardian Wealth Strategies, LLC, a registered investment advisor. CG Advisory Services, LLC, and Guardian Wealth Strategies, LLC, are separate and unaffiliated entities. The topics discussed on this podcast are for educational purposes only and are not intended to be investment advice or recommendations. Listeners should consult with their own financial professionals before making any investment decisions.